I wasn't looking through his phone. I wasn't snooping. I just came home early from a work seminar. The house was quiet, too quiet for 6 p.m. I walked into the living room and heard him talking in the kitchen. His voice was soft, different, not his usual hey babe tone. It was gentler, full of something that I hadn't heard in months. Genuine emotional attention. I peeked in and saw him sitting at the kitchen table, holding a woman's hand. It wasn't sexual, no kissing, but the way he looked at her. It hurt more than any affair I had ever imagined. It was the look I hadn't seen him give me in over a year. Warm, present, soft. I stood frozen. She turned slightly, startled. He noticed me. Time stopped. His mouth opened. But nothing came out. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I walked in, sat down, and just said, "How long has this been going on?" He couldn't answer. So she did. We met at the grief group. My brother died. He was the first person who really listened. And in that moment, something inside me broke, and oddly healed, because I had known something was missing between us. Our dinners had grown silent. Our affection had become routine. I knew he was emotionally disconnected, but I didn't know where that missing part of him had gone. Now I saw it, in the warmth of how he held her pain, how he helped her heal. And for the first time I realized this wasn't just betrayal. This was unmet grief, loneliness, abandonment, not just his, but mine too. We talked for hours. I cried, she cried, and yes, I helped, not by accepting what they did, but by acknowledging the pain behind it, by seeing him not as just a cheater, but as a man who was emotionally starving and didn't know how to ask for help from the woman sleeping beside him every night. We broke up 2 months later, but without hate. I even helped him write a letter to her after, because love can exist, even when trust no longer can. She never imagined betrayal would arrive like this, not with perfume on a shirt, not with lipstick smudged on a collar, and certainly not with a secret hotel receipt or an anonymous message in her inbox. It didn't explode into her life. It slipped in quietly, like a breeze sneaking through a half-closed window. That day was just another Tuesday. No alarms, no instinct telling her to stay alert, just the slow unraveling of something she believed was secure. He was sitting at the kitchen table, that detail stuck in her mind, not in a car, not out somewhere shady, just sitting in their own home in the kitchen, the place they used to eat dinner together, now shared with someone else in a way that felt deeply private. She didn't walk into a scene of nudity or chaos. She walked into something much harder to process, tenderness. He was holding her hand, that was it. No kissing, no undressing, no hasty lies to cover his tracks. Just silence and eye contact, and a kind of closeness that made her chest cave in. Emotional infidelity, the kind people brush off as less serious than cheating, has a way of sinking deeper into the bones. Because sex can be mechanical, but emotional intimacy, that's the part you build, nurture, and protect. And it's the part that's hardest to reclaim once it's been shared elsewhere. She couldn't move for a second. It was as if her legs forgot how to work. Her first instinct wasn't anger. It was confusion. Her brain didn't even register betrayal at first. She thought maybe she had misread the situation. Maybe it was an old friend, a coworker, a grieving sibling, but as she stood there, she watched how his thumb gently rubbed the top of the woman's hand. She saw the way he leaned forward like he was trying to catch every whisper of her breath. And then she saw something that turned her stomach. He smiled, not a guilty smile, not even a nervous one, but the kind of soft, understanding smile she used to live for when they were still in love. That's when it hit her. Not the fact that he had feelings for someone else, but the realization that he hadn't looked at her like that in months, maybe even a year. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It had been happening in slow motion, behind the curtain of their everyday lives. She had just missed it. They still shared a bed, still ate dinner in the same room, still laughed at the same jokes on Netflix, but somewhere along the way, something shifted. She couldn't remember the last time he asked how she was really doing. Or the last time she felt seen. The emotional distance had been growing like a crack in a wind shield, spreading little by little, until the whole thing threatened to shatter. But because there were no big fights, no obvious red flags, she convinced herself that things were just going through a phase. Life was busy, work was stressful, maybe he was tired, maybe she was too needy. She never suspected he was already emotionally gone. Or rather, emotionally present, just not with her. That moment, watching them together, taught her something people don't often talk about. Emotional cheating doesn't feel like betrayal at first. It feels like loss. Like something you once had is now in someone else's hands, and you didn't even realize it slipped away. She didn't scream. She didn't throw things or demand answers. There was no dramatic outburst. She just stared at him, and for the first time he looked ashamed, not caught, not angry, just ashamed that she saw him in that moment, gentle, open, vulnerable, with someone who wasn't his partner. When she finally found her voice, the only words that came out were, "How long has this been going on?" His silence said everything, and suddenly, she remembered all the little signs she had ignored. The late-night texts he said were from work, the sudden interest in going out to clear his mind, the guarded way he started to talk about his emotions, as if they were things meant for someone else. He hadn't hidden it because he was sneaky. He hid it because emotional cheating is easier to deny, easier to rationalize, even to himself. He probably told himself he was just being supportive, that he was just being a friend. But the truth was, he had been feeding an emotional connection outside of their relationship, and whether it turned physical or not didn't even matter at that point. She didn't catch him in bed with another woman. She caught him giving the best of himself to someone else. The version of him she missed, the version he said was just tired, the version she still waited for every night while lying beside him, and that's what made it feel so cruel. Not the secrecy, not even the emotional affair itself, but the fact that he still came home to her, still looked her in the eye, still said "I love you," with the same lips he used to comfort another woman's fears. That moment rewrote everything she thought she knew about betrayal. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It wasn't even fast. It was quiet, intimate, fragile, and that made it so much harder to forget. When most people think of infidelity, they picture chaos. Screaming, shattered glass, ultimatums hurled across rooms like daggers. But real emotional betrayal doesn't always come wrapped in fury. Sometimes it arrives in stillness, in a moment that makes you sit down, breathe deep, and question everything you thought you understood about love, loyalty, and forgiveness. That's how she felt after finding him at the kitchen table with someone else. There was no physical intimacy between them, no affair in the traditional sense, but there was a kind of connection that left no doubt about what was happening. He was emotionally present with another woman in a way he hadn't been with her in a long time. It wasn't about sex. It was about attention, vulnerability, the kind of conversations that unfold slowly over time and require emotional effort, patience, and care. The kind of bond they once shared when their relationship was still young and full of unspoken promises. As she sat across from him, after catching him in that moment, the rage she expected never came. Instead, she felt a strange, painful calm. Her heart didn't pound, it sank, because deep down, some part of her already knew. The emotional absence hadn't happened overnight. It had been happening in pieces, lost glances, distracted conversations, the way he no longer reached for her hand in quiet moments. The betrayal didn't blindside her. It clarified what she had tried so hard not to see. What complicated it even further was that she didn't hate him. That's what shocked her most. She wasn't driven by revenge or the need to punish. Instead, she found herself asking why. Why had he turned to someone else to share that emotional closeness? Why hadn't he come to her when things started to fall apart? Why hadn't they fought harder to reconnect? And perhaps the hardest question of all, had she done the same to him in some way, just in different form? Their relationship had been worn down by the weight of unspoken disappointments, daily pressures, and the erosion that comes from years of emotionally coasting. They were still a team on the outside, paying bills, attending family events, coexisting, but emotionally, they were miles apart. And now, seeing him open up to someone else with such gentle ease, she realized something heartbreaking. Maybe he was just trying to feel again, not escape her, but escape the version of himself that had gone numb inside their relationship. She didn't excuse what he did, but in that silence, she began to understand it. Empathy and betrayal are strange bedfellows. You don't expect them to show up at the same time, but they did. She found herself empathizing with his loneliness, even as her own heartbreak deepened. She saw the way he struggled to speak, to explain, to meet her eyes. He wasn't proud of what he had done. He wasn't defiant or defensive. He looked small, broken, and that image didn't make her feel powerful. It made her feel empty. And then, there was the other woman, the one she had every right to resent. But as the woman quietly explained how they met in a grief support group, how she had been drowning in loss, and how he had listened when no one else would, something shifted. She wasn't just the other woman anymore. She was human, hurting, grieving, and in that strange, surreal moment, the narrator realized they had all been carrying pain, all three of them, different kinds, different origins, but pain nonetheless. The emotional complexity of that moment unraveled her assumptions about right and wrong, black and white. There wasn't one villain and one victim. There were three people, tangled in need, longing, and the kind of misunderstanding that grows in silence. And the person she thought she would hate, him, was someone she suddenly pitied, because he hadn't set out to destroy their relationship. He had simply reached for warmth in a world where he felt emotionally cold. And she knew that feeling. She had felt it too. After hours of conversation, there was no resolution, just understanding, no dramatic apologies or grand gestures, just raw, painful honesty. They sat in the fragments of their shared life, trying to piece together how it had come to this. And the most surprising part was that she still loved him. Not in the same way, not with the same certainty, but with a kind of deep, aching love that doesn't disappear just because someone fails you. That's the cruel irony of emotional betrayal. It doesn't kill love. Sometimes it reveals just how deeply it still lives inside you. But love, she realized, isn't always enough. You can love someone and still know that the damage has reached a point of no return. You can understand someone's pain and still decide not to be part of their healing. You can choose empathy without choosing to stay. That moment became a mirror for everything they had avoided. And what she saw in it wasn't just his failure. It was the failure of their communication, their vulnerability, their shared efforts. Betrayal, it turns out, isn't always about malice. Sometimes, it's about neglect. The slow neglect of each other's emotional needs until someone else steps in to fill the void. And yet, despite it all, she didn't leave that conversation bitter. She left it changed. She had walked in expecting fury and left with a strange peace, born from finally understanding the depth of what had been broken long before that night. It wasn't closure, but it was clarity, and that, in itself, was the beginning.